Okay, so my name is James Kaechele, and I, for the last 16 years, have worked at New York City Parks. Uh, so a little bit of context. New York City Parks has jurisdiction over the approximately 700,000 street trees across all five boroughs of New York City. So that's not just Manhattan, that's Queens, the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. Um, and over the last 16 years, we've planted between 7,000 and 20,000 new street trees annually. So the numbers are pretty big. The scale that we operate across is quite large. My focus of today is going to be mostly on street trees because these are those trees that I am most intimately acquainted with. But and so those are generally 2.5-inch caliper B&B trees, mostly planted by contractors hired by the Parks Department to prep and plant street trees across the city. Understand also that the agency, the Parks Department, does plant trees in natural areas in forest restoration projects, and those are mostly 2-gallon size trees. They're all natives, and they're all grown from local seed sources. So those are, on the orders of tens of thousands annually across the city. And we have tree procurement contracts in place for both stock types. They're separately managed, they're separately bid out, but it's this similar mechanism for both that B&B material, larger size for streets, and that 2-gallon material on the forest restoration areas. So I'll say just don't be thrown by the scale that we're operating on. Everything that we're doing is scalable. We have to break the city down into different management units so that we can manage it ourselves. So often I think these sort of management unit sizes are closer in size to some of our smaller or mid-sized cities across the country. So with that, prior to 2008, our model for getting trees to plant in our streets was that the Parks Department would bid out a tree planting contract, and that contractor, that landscape contractor, was responsible for getting trees to plant. And this led to some challenges, right? We didn't know what would be available at nurseries. We didn't know often what nursery we'd be going to until after the projects were designed. So, and on any project, you'd have a forester out there who spent time visiting sites, looking at locations, thinking about the right tree for the right place, only to show up at the nursery and the nursery staff say, "Oh yeah, we don't got any of those." So that's a problem, right? We also had a problem with trees that were low-limbed. We're planting on the street here, so we need a lot of clearance for pedestrians and vehicles. And I got to tell you, something like this upright hornbeam, I don't know anybody grown at limbed at 6 feet for like a, planting in a housing development. It's just us on the street. Another challenge, right, is we're going through nurseries that we are not familiar with, and there's poor structure. The quality is really all over the map. And I think ultimately the biggest challenge is that Parks was not in control of where the trees were coming from, when they were being harvested or delivered. And it's hard to set your schedules for the rest of the project on when you're going to plant if you don't know when you're going to have the trees available. So being in control of this part of the project is key. So what was our solution? We bid out 9-year-long tree procurement contracts. This is looking back to 2008 across 3 geographic regions. Deb pointed out, right, that not every nursery is great at growing everything, and you shouldn't expect to find everything you need at one nursery. So you might need to reach out across areas. Part of this selfishly, right, is for New York. We needed to get what we needed. But also we recognized that we couldn't just suck up every single tree in, New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. That would put a lot of other municipalities and tree planting groups in a tough bind. So we in these contracts, we have these trees that are custom grown. We're able to control the seed source for those 2-gallon forest restoration trees, and we're able to have those trees grown for us specifically. We're also, if you're a municipality and you need to get buy-in from like financial controls people, you can also say that we're able to control for market volatility, right, against both price and availability of plants over the long term. That's something that our finance folks were happy to hear. So through these contracts, which have either been renewed or rebid in the subsequent years to today, have been able to provide a great relationship with the nurseries who are growing trees for us. So we're able to give our nursery partners a list of species that we will use in the quantity we will need at the size we need, and give them the specifications for growing. And because we have this relationship, we're also able to see 2 and 3 and sometimes even 4 years into the future of what is going to be available, so that if we need to change the timeline for our projects based on availability of trees, we can do that to some extent. One of the huge benefits here, right, is that the growers know that they have a sold tree, so long as they meet the specs at the moment they plant it in their field. Growers can custom grow what you need if you have a project that is really specific. And the growers are willing to put in the extra time because they know who the market or customer is going to be. Example, we have a bunch of coastal areas where we plant. Juniperus virginiana is great. It's tough. It grows in sand in the salty air. We have that limbed up to 6 feet for planting on those coastal streets. Nobody would be growing that in the industry unless we asked for it. So in these contracts, we had, among many things, right, included language from the American Standard for Nursery Stock. At least you as a tree specifier should be familiar with this. If you're buying trees or specifying trees, you should read through this document. It's available online. It's an interesting read. I think it's a good read. It gives some great, illustrations. It's incredibly helpful. So one of the key things that we were able to do through these tree procurement contracts is really tighten the screws on quality, not just about the tree above the ground, which of course is the part that everybody sees, but also the part below ground. If you have a beautiful tree that looks perfect above ground, but it comes in a root ball that's falling apart, the sands of time are leaking out the side, nobody's going to notice how beautiful that tree is. If you're going to be taking care of that tree and guaranteeing that it's going to live, you're worried about those roots. So we're able to hone in on consistency across supplier so that no matter what nursery our trees are coming from, it's hard to tell them apart from the root ball because we're getting the same package across the board. And this means that when your crew comes out to plant the trees, they have the right tools to get them planted. It makes that operation much smoother. So, if you're going to have staples in the root ball, you have the right tool to deal with that. If you're going to deal with nails, your workers know to look out for them. If it's just burlap and wire cage, you've got the right things to do to deal with that at the time of planting. Also, I will say, one of the key things that we've really harped on and built this relationship with our nurseries on is harvesting techniques, right? Making sure that trees are dug with the proper depth of that root flare, right? In part, this makes, again, planting operation easier. You know how deep you need to dig the hole. You're not doing extra work. You can get maybe 1 or 2 more trees planted per day, thinking about production. You're making sure that it's getting in the ground at the right depth, but also you're getting all the roots that you pay for. All right. If you have a root ball where the first root is halfway down through the ball, you get in a lot of dirt. By the way, the grower wants to hang on to that because that's their big asset, is their soil and fertility. Um, but you're not getting as much root. And we know that roots are critical, especially as a transplanted B&B tree. As much root as you possibly can get means easier establishment, less challenges to a healthy tree at the 2 and 3 year mark. And I'll say, as we wrap up this, tree diversity throughout this project has increased incredibly, not just at the B&B size, but also in this forestry availability. So getting more trees available means you're getting really the right tree planted in the right place. Our tree specifiers, our foresters out in the street, they spend a lot of time thinking about putting the right tree in the right place that's suited for that location. These are trees that we're going to own for the rest of their life. We're invested in them being successful right off the bat. If you have a good broad palette of trees to pick from, you're going to get the right thing planted, and you've controlled for one of these factors that's a challenge to establishment. So I will say with that, this is our goal. Trees along the street, nice and green, all throughout New York City and every municipality across the country. Awesome partner who is going to speak next here, Pete Worth from Kaechele Nursery.